Snow fell like whispers over the endless forest, covering everything in white silence. A lone man named Elias walked through that silence, carrying an axe on his shoulder. Each breath came out like smoke, each step heavy against the frozen ground. He had come here to forget, to start again, to build a life where no one could find him. For days, Elias searched the wilderness for the right place. He found it near a frozen lake where the trees curved like guardians of an old secret. There, he decided to build his cabin, log by log, with nothing but his hands, tools, and quiet determination. The world behind him, cities, people, and noise, felt like another lifetime. He began cutting trees from dawn to dusk, stacking logs, measuring lines with rough chalk. Every sound echoed: the strike of his axe, the creak of the wood, the wind whispering between branches. At night, he sat by a small fire, eating dry bread, watching the shadows move across the snow. He told himself he was alone, that this was how he wanted it, but his heart knew otherwise. Sometimes, when the wind calmed, he felt a strange presence. It wasn't the feeling of danger, more like being observed quietly, almost kindly. The hair on his neck stood up, but no sound came from the woods. Only the snow fell, soft, endless, and patient. One evening, as he was chopping firewood, Elias heard something unusual, a faint hum, like a song carried by the wind. It was not human, nor any bird he knew. He stopped, listening, eyes scanning the tree line. The humming stopped, then came again, gentle, sorrowful, disappearing as the storm grew stronger. He waited, breath held, then shook his head and went back to work, pretending it was only the wind. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay by the fire, staring at the cabin roof he had built, each log holding part of his story. But outside, through the cracks, he saw movement, a shimmer of blue between the trees. It vanished when he blinked. He got up, grabbed his coat, and opened the door. The cold hit him like a blade, but the forest was still. He whispered into the dark, "Who's there?" Only the wind answered, wrapping around his voice and carrying it away. The next morning, Elias found footprints near his cabin, small ones, almost human but lighter. They circled his camp and vanished toward the woods. He crouched, touching one, feeling the depth. Something or someone had been close, watching. He left some food by the door, half joking with himself. "For the forest spirit," he said. That night, the food was gone, not a crumb left. A chill ran down his spine, not of fear, but of wonder. Days passed, and the watcher never revealed itself. Elias continued building, his cabin slowly taking shape. Walls rose, a roof covered his head, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't truly alone. Sometimes, when he worked, he caught glimpses of faint blue light between the trees, like eyes reflecting firelight. Once, he thought he saw a figure, tall, thin, and graceful, but when he looked again, the snow had erased it. Still, there was something comforting in that unseen company. He began talking aloud while working. "Another log done," he'd say, or, "You'd think I'd be used to this cold by now." He laughed softly, half to himself, half to the silence. And though no one replied, he felt a strange warmth in his chest. One evening, a heavy snowstorm rolled in, covering the lake and trees in silver mist. Elias sat near his fire again, watching the flames dance against the storm. Outside, through the window, he thought he saw those same glowing eyes, closer than ever. The shape lingered for a moment, then turned away into the woods. Without thinking, Elias opened the door and shouted into the storm, "You don't have to hide." His voice echoed, swallowed by the wind. Hours later, the storm died down, and the forest returned to silence. When Elias stepped outside the next morning, he found something left on his doorstep, a small bundle of berries, fresh and glowing faintly blue. He froze, staring. Someone had been there, close enough to touch his world. A quiet smile crossed his face as he whispered, "Maybe I'm not alone after all." And deep among the snow-covered trees, unseen in the mist, a pair of soft blue eyes watched him. The alien mother's heart trembled. For the first time in years, she had seen kindness instead of fear. From the shadows of the forest, Aura watched the human every day. She was tall, her skin faintly blue under the snowlight, and her eyes shimmered like ice touched by moonfire. She had not seen another living creature up close in years. Not since the crash. Not since her world had burned and fallen from the sky. Her people were gone, her mate buried beneath metal and frost. Only her small daughter, Lyra, had survived, fragile and bright like a flame that refused to die. They lived in a hollow cave behind a curtain of vines, their only warmth a weak thermal stone salvaged from the wreck. Food was scarce, and the forest was merciless. Yet every evening, Ara climbed the ridge to watch the strange creature, the human, work on his cabin. She had seen him cut trees, stumble, curse the cold, and rise again with stubborn strength. He was nothing like the soldiers she remembered, the ones who brought destruction. This one was quiet, patient, almost gentle. Sometimes she saw him sit by the fire, staring into the flames as if speaking to ghosts. And though she couldn't understand his words, she understood his loneliness. It was the same loneliness that haunted her, that made the nights endless and the silence heavy. Little Lyra often tugged at her arm, whispering, "Mother, who is he?" Ara would hush her, fear pressing into her chest. "Not our kind, my child," she would whisper. "Humans bring danger." But when Lyra's small face fell in sadness, Ara's heart ached. Her daughter had never known laughter beyond whispers, never played under open skies without fear. That night, as the wind howled outside their cave, Ara thought of the human again. She remembered the food he had left, untouched by greed, offered without demand. It had been the first act of kindness she had seen in this frozen place. She wanted to believe it was real, but hope was a dangerous thing. Still, when she saw him working the next day, cutting wood despite bleeding hands, she felt something stir inside her, something she had buried long ago. Days passed like that. Ara and Lyra watched from the trees while the human built his world piece by piece. Sometimes he spoke softly, his voice carried by the wind. She didn't know the words, but the tone was calm, filled with thought and quiet strength. It made her wonder what his life had been before the forest. What pain drove him here to hide from his own kind? Once, Lyra ran too close to the clearing, her small feet leaving faint tracks in the snow. Ara's heart stopped when she saw the human pause, look up, and frown at the prince. She pulled her daughter back, whispering sharply, "Never again." But that night, when she returned to the ridge, she saw something new. Food left on a stone near the cabin. Bread, fruit, a gesture so simple, yet so impossible. Her throat tightened, and tears froze on her cheeks. It had been years since anyone had shown her compassion. The next morning, when Lyra asked if they could take the food, Ara hesitated. Her instincts screamed no, but her daughter's eyes, bright and hungry, silenced that voice. Together, they approached the stone carefully. Ara touched the bread, still soft from warmth. She whispered a quiet thank you in her tongue, a sound like wind through crystal. Then they vanished back into the woods before dawn returned. As the days turned into weeks, this silent exchange continued. He worked, she watched. He offered food, she accepted. Neither saw the other fully, yet both felt less alone. The distance between them grew smaller, not in steps, but in hearts. On one rare, clear night, Ara stood among the trees and looked toward his cabin. The window glowed with orange light, and inside she saw him laughing softly at something. Maybe a memory, maybe the fire itself. The sight struck her deeply. For the first time in forever, she smiled. But the smile faded when Lyra whispered, "Mother, will he ever see us?" Ara's voice trembled. "Perhaps one day, when the forest no longer fears us." As the snow fell again, she lifted her gaze to the stars, the same stars that once shone on her lost home. She closed her eyes, whispering to the wind, "Maybe he was sent by the stars to remind us what kindness looks like." And far across the clearing, as if fate itself listened, Elias looked toward the woods. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw a blue glow move gently among the trees. He smiled to himself and whispered, "Good night, whoever you are." The bond had begun, unseen, unspoken, yet alive. And in that frozen world, two lonely hearts had finally found an echo of warmth. The storm came without warning. Dark clouds rolled over the frozen lake, and the wind screamed like 1,000 ghosts through the trees. Elias barely had time to seal his cabin door before the snow hit. The blizzard howled with fury, shaking the wooden walls, dusting the floor with white powder. He threw more logs into the fire, watching the flames fight the cold, but his heart was restless. Outside, something felt wrong, a feeling deeper than fear, an instinct that whispered, "Someone's out there." He grabbed his lantern and pushed open the door. The wind nearly ripped it from his hands. Snow stung his face like knives as he stepped into the storm. He shouted into the wind, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Only the storm answered, until, faintly, he heard it. A cry, soft and terrified, carried by the wind. A child's cry. Elias froze, his heart pounding, then ran toward the sound, boots sinking into the deep snow. Through the swirling white, he saw a small figure stumbling near a fallen tree. It was tiny, fragile, wrapped in tattered fabric glowing faintly blue. He didn't think, he just moved. He reached the child, lifted her into his arms, and gasped. Her skin was cool, her veins shimmered like light under glass. But she was real, alive, trembling. "Easy, easy now," he whispered, pulling his coat around her. "I've got you." The child whimpered in a voice that wasn't quite human, but the fear in it was. He carried her back through the storm, kicking open his cabin door and laying her near the fire. Her eyes fluttered, large and luminous, filled with a mix of wonder and terror. Elias knelt beside her, offering water and wrapping a blanket tight. "Don't be afraid," he said gently. "You're safe here." For a moment, she stared at him as if she didn't understand, then whispered something soft. "A name maybe, Lyra." He repeated it quietly, "Lyra," and she seemed to calm. Outside, the wind roared again, and then, from the forest, another sound cut through the storm. A scream, fierce and sharp, not of fear, but rage. Elias turned, instinctively reaching for his axe. Before he could move, the door burst open. Snow and shadow flooded in. There she stood, Ara, the alien mother, her blue eyes blazing like lightning. Her body glowed with bioluminescent light, her skin marked with faint silver lines that shimmered as she breathed. In her hand, she held a shard of metal, curved, like a blade from another world. Elias raised his hand slowly. "I mean no harm." But Ara was trembling, torn between fury and fear. Her gaze locked on Lyra, who lay near the fire, safe and warm. When she saw the blanket around her child, her breath hitched. Elias stepped back, letting her pass. Ara dropped the blade, rushing to her daughter, holding her close. Lyra stirred weakly, whispering something in her own tongue. Tears shone in Ara's eyes as she looked down at her child, then up at the human who had saved her. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. No words, only firelight between them. Elias saw exhaustion, loss, and strength in her eyes, a mother's eyes. And Ara saw something she hadn't seen in years, compassion, not fear. He pointed to the fire and spoke softly. "Stay." She didn't understand the word, but she understood the tone. She nodded slowly, her body still tense. He stepped back, sitting near the door, keeping his hands visible. The storm outside grew wilder, but inside the cabin, a fragile calm began to form. Lyra slept peacefully between them. Ara watched her, then looked again at the man, at the warmth, the food, the fire that burned with steady light. Her world had been dark for so long. Now, in this tiny wooden place built by strange hands, she felt something dangerous, hope. Hours passed, and the wind finally began to fade. Elias stood and carefully placed more wood on the fire. Ara flinched, but when he smiled gently, she relaxed. He gestured toward the snow melting from her cloak, pointing at a blanket, then at her, offering warmth. She hesitated, then accepted it silently. Their eyes met once more, and for a heartbeat, it was as if two broken worlds had found a bridge. Outside, the storm died. Inside, three souls, human and alien, shared the same light. None of them knew that this single night, born from fear and snow, would change both their lives forever. Morning came slowly. The storm had passed, but the world outside the cabin was buried in white silence. The trees bent under heavy snow, the lake was frozen solid, and the air shimmered with pale light. Inside the cabin, the fire still burned, its orange glow painting warmth over wooden walls. Elias woke first, sitting up from his chair, his back aching. Across the room, the alien mother and her child slept close together, wrapped in his spare blanket. For a long moment, he just looked at them, the curve of their faces, the soft blue shimmer under their skin. They looked peaceful, almost human, almost fragile. He quietly added another log to the fire, the crackling sound waking Ara. Her eyes opened in a flash, wild with alertness, but when she saw him standing there unarmed, she calmed. They stared at each other in silence, two strangers from two worlds. Elias pointed at the pot on the fire, then to her, offering food. She tilted her head, cautious, her hands still around Lyra. But the smell of warm broth filled the air, and slowly, she nodded. He poured a bowl, pushed it toward her, and stepped back. Ara took it carefully, sniffing, then tasting, her eyes softening as warmth spread through her body. She said something in her language, a sound like flowing water, and he smiled even though he couldn't understand. Then he pointed at himself. Elias, he said, tapping his chest. She blinked, processing the strange sound, then placed a hand on her heart. Ara. The words shimmered like music. For the first time, their names existed in the same room. Little Lyra stirred and blinked at the fire, her small hands reaching toward it, fascinated by the flames. Elias smiled, showing her a wooden toy he had carved, a small bird he had once made to pass the time. Lyra gasped softly, touching it with delight. Ara watched her daughter laugh, a sound so rare it almost broke her heart. She looked at the human again, not as a threat, but as something unfamiliar yet kind. Hours passed, and they began to move within the same space like cautious travelers sharing a path. When Elias went outside to fetch water, Ara followed, her eyes scanning the forest as if expecting danger. She noticed the deep cuts in his hands, the frostbite on his knuckles. Without a word, she took a small vial from her belt, a glowing blue liquid, and gently touched it to his wounds. He flinched at first, then watched in amazement as the pain faded, the skin knitting itself back together. He whispered, "Thank you," though she didn't know the word. She only smiled faintly, and in that smile, the wall between them cracked a little. As night fell again, the wind returned, but softer now, whispering instead of screaming. Two fires burned inside the cabin, the one on the hearth, and the one slowly igniting in their hearts. Elias sat on the floor, fixing a broken chair, while Ara mended a torn piece of cloth. Lyra hummed a soft tune, one that echoed through the small room like a memory of another world. For the first time in years, Elias didn't feel the weight of silence pressing on him. He looked at them, two beings from the stars, and felt something new rise inside him. Not fear, not curiosity, but belonging. Later that night, as Lyra slept, Ara looked at the human and then at the fire. She tried to speak, her voice low and careful. "Why here?" she asked, her words heavy but clear. Elias understood the question somehow. He looked at the flame and said slowly, "Too much noise, too many people." He tapped his chest. "Peace." She nodded, whispering the word back like it was sacred. "Peace." They sat in silence, the firelight flickering across their faces. Two souls who had lost everything, now sharing warmth neither had dared to hope for. Outside, snow continued to fall, but inside, the cabin no longer felt like a cage. It felt like the beginning of something fragile and beautiful. When Elias finally fell asleep in his chair, Ara looked at him for a long time. She could have left then, taken her daughter, and vanished into the trees. But she didn't. Instead, she placed another log on the fire, the flames rising gently. She whispered a word in her tongue, a blessing, a thank you, perhaps a prayer. Then she closed her eyes beside the human's fire, feeling safe for the first time in years. And somewhere far above the frozen world, unseen stars blinked brighter, as if the universe itself smiled at the quiet miracle inside a wooden cabin built by human hands. Days turned into weeks, and the snow began to soften. Icicles melted from the cabin roof, dripping like slow tears. The sun, weak and distant, painted gold across the frozen lake. The forest, once silent and cruel, now felt alive again. Elias worked from dawn till dusk, repairing what the storm had broken. And every day, Ara and little Lyra stayed close, no longer hiding in the woods. At first, their words were few. Elias spoke gently, showing with gestures more than language could. Ara watched carefully, learning, repeating small words. Fire, food, sleep, sky. Each word built a bridge between them, one step at a time. Lyra followed him everywhere. She laughed when he chopped wood and tried to copy his swing with a stick. Elias couldn't help but smile, her joy brightening the gray days. Sometimes, when Ara saw them together, her heart ached with memories of another man, another world. One evening, as twilight filled the cabin, Elias found Ara sitting outside by the lake. She stared at the horizon where the sky met the ice, silent and still. He sat beside her, waiting. After a while, she spoke, her voice low, broken by old pain. "My home, far," she said, pointing toward the stars. Her eyes shimmered, reflecting their faint glow. "Ship, crash," she whispered. "Fire, screams gone." She pressed her hand to her chest. My mate. He saved Lyra." Her voice trembled. "He no come back." Elias felt something twist inside him. He didn't speak, only placed a hand over his heart, then to the sky, a quiet gesture of respect. She understood, and for the first time, tears fell freely down her blue cheeks. He didn't wipe them, didn't interrupt. He just sat beside her until the stars came fully alive above them. The silence between them was no longer cold. It was shared, understood. The next morning, he took her outside, showing her the half-built extension of the cabin. He pointed at the walls, the tools, then to her. "Help?" Ara blinked, unsure at first, then nodded. And together they began to build. It was slow work, but something in it felt sacred. He showed her how to cut and lift the logs. She showed him how to use her alien tools, small metal devices from her crashed ship that hummed and fused with seamlessly. They laughed when mistakes happened. They learned to read each other's movements. When she stumbled, he caught her hand. When he slipped, she offered her strength. By evening, the frame of a new wall stood high, solid, strong, unshaken by the wind. As days passed, the cabin changed. It grew larger, warmer, brighter. It no longer belonged only to a human or an alien. It belonged to all three of them. Sometimes, Elias would find Ara humming softly as she worked. The sound was unlike any song he'd ever heard, haunting yet beautiful. It filled the air with peace. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. It was a song of rebuilding, of life after loss. At night, they shared meals by the fire. Elias taught her to cook bread. She taught him to brew a glowing drink that tasted like sweet air and warmth. Lyra would curl up near the flames, drawing pictures in the ash with her fingers, strange stars, ships, and cabins that touched the clouds. One evening, as the fire burned low, Elias looked at Ara and said quietly, "Home," pointing to the cabin. Then he placed a hand on his chest. "You, Lyra, home." Ara's eyes widened, her lips parting as if the word was too heavy to hold. She looked around, the walls they built, the warmth they shared, her daughter sleeping peacefully, and whispered the word back. "Home." For the first time, the word didn't hurt. It felt real. The forest outside rustled softly. The stars glimmered through the smoke hole in the roof. And in that small cabin in the middle of nowhere, humanity and alien kind shared something greater than survival. They shared belonging. Elias leaned back, smiling faintly. Ara placed her hand near his on the table, not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth. Neither spoke, but both knew. The loneliness that once ruled them had finally begun to fade. And somewhere in the distance, a new sound echoed through the forest. Not the wind this time, but something else, something approaching. The peace they had built was about to be tested. The peace did not last. It never does, not in stories written by the stars. The snow had begun to melt, rivers cracked open, and birds returned to the trees. Spring was coming, and with it came noise, the sound of engines far away. Elias heard them first, distant but clear. He stood outside the cabin, squinting toward the ridge, the low hum of metal crawling through the wind. His heart sank. He knew that sound. Humans. Inside, Ara felt it too. Her skin shimmered brighter, her eyes wide with alarm. She clutched Lyra close, whispering in her own tongue. "No, not again." Elias rushed inside, his breath sharp. He spoke quickly. "People, my people, coming." Ara's face tightened with fear, her voice shaking. "They find us, we die." He shook his head. "No one dies, not here." But deep down, he wasn't sure. The noise grew louder until shadows appeared between the trees. Men in heavy jackets and helmets, carrying scanners and rifles. They followed the energy signals from Ara's old ship. When they saw the cabin, one of them called out, "Anyone here? This area is restricted." Elias stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "Just me," he said, forcing a calm smile. They looked at him, puzzled. "Did you notice anything strange? Any tech, crash debris, lights at night?" He shrugged. "Only the stars." But one of the men pointed to the faint blue glow from the cracks of the door. "What's that light?" he demanded. Elias's pulse quickened. "Lantern," he said quickly, but the soldier moved forward. Elias blocked his path. "Private place," he said firmly. "No need to go inside." The man frowned. "You don't have authority here." Elias looked straight into his eyes and replied, "Maybe not, but you'll have to go through me." Inside the cabin, Ara held Lyra close, her heart racing. Through the wooden wall, she heard the words she didn't understand but felt the meaning. Elias was standing between them and danger, something she had never believed a human would do. Outside, tension thickened like frost. The leader of the search team raised a hand. "Stand down, woodsman," he said. "We're just scanning." He motioned toward a device that pulsed with light. As the waves swept over the cabin, the detector beeped wildly. "Confirmed alien tech signature," one soldier shouted. Before they could move, the cabin door burst open. Ara stepped out, glowing like living starlight, her eyes fierce and unafraid. Lyra stood behind her, clutching her hand. The soldiers froze, weapons half raised. No one spoke, no one breathed. Elias moved between them, shouting, "Don't shoot." Snow swirled around them like slow ash. For a long heartbeat, the world stood still. The soldiers stared at her. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't even threatening. Just a mother, exhausted and trembling. Her voice broke the silence. "No fight, please." The words were simple but powerful. Something human in their tone made the men hesitate. One soldier, young and nervous, took a step forward, slipped on the ice, and fell toward the frozen river. Without thinking, Ara dashed forward, grabbing him before he vanished beneath the ice. The glow of her hands melted the frost, her strength pulling him to safety. The man looked up, gasping, eyes wide with disbelief. "You saved me," he whispered. Ara nodded slowly, saying nothing. Elias looked around. The fear in the soldier's eyes had turned into something else. Respect, maybe shame, maybe realization. The leader lowered his weapon. "We were told aliens were dangerous," he said quietly. "But I don't see danger here." Elias's voice was steady. "No, you see life." They stood there in silence. The wind howled once more, then faded. The commander gave one final look at the cabin and nodded. "Let's go," he said. No one argued. One by one, they turned and disappeared into the trees, their tracks fading behind them. When the last sound of engines died away, Ara turned to Elias. Her voice trembling. "You protect." He smiled softly, shaking his head. "We protect each other." She looked at him for a long moment, the firelight from the cabin flickering in her eyes. Then she whispered a single word, one he finally understood. "Family." The stars began to appear again above the clearing. And under their quiet light, the human and the alien mother stood side by side. No longer strangers, no longer afraid. The storm of fear had passed, leaving only trust. But far beyond the horizon, unseen by them both, a signal pulsed quietly into space. Somewhere, someone had heard the scan, and the peace they had earned might soon face its greatest test. Spring melted into summer. The snow that once ruled the forest was now only a memory glittering at the edge of the lake. Grass rose through the melting frost, and the cabin stood proudly among the green, a symbol of survival and something greater. Elias worked in the sunlight, repairing the roof and planting small crops near the water. Inside, laughter echoed, the kind that makes silence gentle instead of cold. Lyra chased birds through the tall grass, her small feet leaving glowing trails that faded slowly behind her. Ara watched from the porch, her hands resting on the wooden railing. Her eyes, once full of fear, now carried peace. When Elias walked past, she smiled, the quiet kind of smile that said more than words could. He smiled back, knowing that somehow, two broken worlds had found a place to breathe. Days moved softly. They hunted, they cooked, they built. Elias taught Ara human customs, how to read simple words, how to laugh at bad jokes, how to call rain a blessing. In return, she taught him the songs of her people, stories sung in tones that shimmered like wind and moonlight. Each night, the three of them sat by the fire outside the cabin. The flames cracked, the stars reflected on the lake, and time felt still. One evening, Elias looked up and whispered, "I almost forgot what peace feels like." Ara turned to him and said in her soft, broken English, "Peace you make." He chuckled quietly. "No, we made it, together." Lyra giggled and clapped, repeating the word, "together." And for a moment, the sound of that single word filled the world with warmth. But peace always carries echoes of the past. One night, when the fire burned low, a faint sound came from the sky, a distant hum, metallic, familiar. Elias and Ara both looked up, hearts tightening. A small light moved across the clouds, not a star, but a ship, the same kind that once brought pain and fear. Ara held Lyra close, whispering softly, "They come again." Elias stood beside her, eyes fixed on the glowing streak. He felt the old fear rising, the dread of losing what they had built. The ship passed over the lake, then slowed, hovering above the clearing. A beam of light swept across the forest, illuminating the cabin. Elias stepped forward, raising his hand. "Wait," he said quietly, though no one could hear. "Not this time." The light stopped. From within, a voice echoed, metallic, calm, translated through static. "Survivors detected, non-hostile signal received." Ara's eyes widened. Her people, the last remnants of her world, had come searching after all. She looked at Elias, torn between joy and sorrow. He saw the truth in her eyes, the impossible choice. Home, or the life they built here. He whispered, "You can go, Ara, you should go." But she shook her head slowly, tears glimmering like liquid stars. She touched his chest gently, her voice trembling. "This is home." Behind her, Lyra whispered, "Stay," and hugged her mother's leg. The light from the ship shimmered brighter, then faded, drifting upward as if the stars themselves understood her choice. And then it was gone, leaving only silence and starlight behind. Elias exhaled slowly, his heart full. He looked at the sky and whispered, "They know where you are now." Ara nodded. "Yes, but they see peace." She turned to him. "They not come again to fight." He smiled. "Then maybe humanity learned something too." The night grew quiet again. Lyra fell asleep in her mother's arms, the fire dying down to soft embers. Elias looked at the cabin they had built, the same place where everything began, log by log, dream by dream. It was no longer just a shelter, it was a promise. He whispered softly, "We built more than walls, we built a life." Ara's voice followed, warm as the fire, "We built heart." The sky cleared completely, revealing the vast sea of stars above. Somewhere out there, worlds still fought, planets still burned, but here, in a small corner of the galaxy, peace had taken root. A human, an alien mother, and her child sat together under the same sky, no longer divided by fear, but united by love. The wind moved through the trees like a soft song. Elias closed his eyes, letting it brush his face. He whispered one last thought to the stars. Maybe kindness was never alien after all. And as the night wrapped the cabin in quiet light, the universe itself seemed to sigh, content, timeless, and human.